Dr. Carlson, thanks very much for sitting down with me, talking with me. We're at the Touchstone Conference right now, and you're going to be talking about politics tomorrow. Is that correct?
A certain kind of politics, yes.
What kind of politics are you planning to talk about tomorrow?
Well, the issue being, what do you do to fight the culture wars? My argument tomorrow will be is that it's still possible to win the political side of the culture wars. One of the common assumptions is that in the United States, the culture wars, the battle over abortion, the battle over same-sex marriage, LGBT rights, that it's lost, that's over, and that we need to do something different. My argument will be is that in Europe right now, some interesting things are happening, and a Christian politics is in fact growing and becoming more successful. And we may have some things to learn from that.
That's really interesting. What's happening in Europe that's giving you some hope about this?
Well, it's been the emergence in several countries of strong Christian governments who are actually succeeding in rewriting and re-energizing Christian sexual ethics, family ethics, Christian morality into law. Two countries in particular. One is Hungary, under the government of Viktor Orland, which has a very bad press in the United States, but it's led by Christians. He, in fact, is a Christian convert to Calvinism, married to a Catholic. And his government, which has run 3 elections in a row with supermajorities in each case, is peopled by Christians, including several pastors who are members of the government. The head of our equivalent of Health and Human Services is a Calvinist pastor. And they are doing some remarkable things in terms of promoting marriage, promoting the birth of children within marriage, and defending family life. That's at least one example. The other example would be in Poland. Law and Justice Party, which is the ruling party since 2015, has a very similar program. So there's some lessons to learn, I think.
Are there any Western European examples of places where Christian politics is being advanced? Or
there is. It's one that's sort of halfway right now, and that's in Italy, of all places. There was a Christian Democratic Party in Italy which helped rebuild Italy after World War II. We could maybe talk about that a little later. But finally, the party just kind of dissolved into a web of corruption in the 1980s and 1990s and pretty well disappeared, leaving Christians really nowhere to go in terms of voting. But there's a party in Italy, it was called the Northern League, the League of the North, which emerged around 1990. And it was mainly a negative party at first. It was opposed to immigration, opposed to open borders. League of the North, they did not particularly like Southern Italians. They thought the Sicilians were lazy welfare bums and things like that. So it was not a nice party. No. But, and the last time they ran on those platforms in 2012, they got 4% of the vote. So, I mean, it was kind of insignificant. However, the party changed. They got new leaders. They adopted a pro-family, pro-Christian public policy. And in the 2018 election, they went from 4% up to 18% of the vote, drawing for the first time traditional Catholics to vote for them. This last June, in elections for the European Parliament, their vote total shot up to 36%, making them by far the largest party in Italy. They're currently not in a coalition government. They were for a while, but they are now the largest party, and they have a very distinct pro-life, pro-family agenda. Is there some cynicism behind this? Well, in politics, usually there is. There's some politicians latching onto it whose personal stories are not ideal. But the party has reinvented itself as a pro-life, pro-family party, and they're winning elections.
So what can American political parties learn from that?
One problem American parties have is in our two-party system, it's almost impossible for a third party to emerge. With that said, I think there's going to be an opportunity opening up. I don't want to get into heavy commentary on the phenomenon of Donald Trump, but I will say this, is I think the Trump domination of the Republican Party is not, my prediction is it's not going to end well, one way or the other. I wish it would end well, but I'm not sure. I don't think it will. I think the Republican Party will have a crisis time in the not too distant future where, in fact, it's ripe for a takeover. And by that, I mean it's ripe for social conservatives to actually gain control of the party. Social conservatives, the pro-life, pro-family people have been, treated as at best second-class citizens within the Republican Party. The main part of the party, the dominant leaders of the party, are the pro-business, pro-corporation, pro-Wall Street people. They'll take social conservative votes, but it's a low priority. They'll throw them a few small bones, but they will never make their agenda the first part of their agenda. I think that's going to change. I think the party is going to fall apart. And I think, again, it's possible to see a takeover of the party, genuine takeover by real Christians, real pro-family, pro-life people. I think that could happen. So I think that's one lesson we may have, is there's an opportunity coming. It's not going to be pretty. I think the next couple of elections are not going to be pretty. Things are getting uglier and uglier, even as we speak right now, almost on a daily basis. But there's an opportunity, I think, again, for pro-family politics to really run a political party, or at least be the dominant theme of a political party.
Do you think that there's the same sort of opportunity in the Democratic Party in the United States?
Boy, I wish it was. Right now, the Democratic Party is an anti-family party. The odd thing, and I've written some histories on this, is that from, the 1880s until the mid-1960s, the Democratic Party was the party of the family. This is the party that drew Southern evangelical votes, by and large, white evangelicals. It drew African-American votes, mainly religious people. It drew the votes of Roman Catholics. It was the party of the working class, and many Roman Catholics were in or had come out of the working class. And it was the party of, again, promoting pro-family politics relative to politics based on Wall Street. But that ended in the late 60s and early 70s. And this is when Ronald Reagan, the Reagan Democrats, moved over from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. But that marriage has never been a happy one. But at this point, the Democratic Party, just last night, I'm sort of dating this interview, but just last night there was they had an event on equality, quote unquote, where all the candidates all of the leading candidates were at a question and answer session where they all endorsed the entire LGBT agenda, which, in its essence is an anti-family, certainly an anti-life agenda as well. The abortion rights are a deep part of that as well. So I don't see anybody within the Democratic Party, sadly, holding to the values that used to animate that party.
It seems to me it's not going to come from white Democrats. But do you think that there might be a chance for minority communities within the Democratic Party, which are much more historically religious than are white Democrats? Do you think there might be the opportunity for such individuals to operate or to become a growing share of that constituency? And
boy, I hope so. It's been a dream and kind of a hope for a long time, for me at least. It's possible that someone could come along and build that case and build that coalition. It would have to be, as we say, a person of color who could lead that. It's possible. I suppose it's possible. And it just hasn't happened, though. I mean, the sexual ethics and the family ethics of the Democratic Party today are largely being written by rich white people. You would think that would be a problem for African Americans, for Hispanics, for, recent, even Islamic immigrants. What relationship do they have to what we call the sexual needs of rich white liberals? And the answer is nothing. But no one's found a way to do that. It's certainly possible.
Yeah. So you talk about, and the politics of the family. Is that correct, Dr. Carlson? Now, would you just tell me a little bit more about that? What in particular do you focus on when you write or speak about the politics of the family?
I did my doctoral dissertation on the origins of family policy in Sweden in the 1920s and 1930s, and studying the work of a couple of socialists, social democrats, by the name of Alva Myrdal and her husband Gunnar Myrdal. I learned a lot from that study. One thing I learned from them, which is entirely correct, is that why do we need a family politics? Why is that important? Well, putting it in a nutshell, family life, as we know it, traditional family life, I like to call it natural family life, is at home in a pre-industrial setting. It's at home on a family farm. It's at home in a workman's cottage or a workman's shop where the family lives on the second floor and the shop is on the first floor where the craftsman works. That was the normal human experience in every society, for every generation until about 200 years ago. The Industrial Revolution, the rise of industry, has put real pressure on families. Mm-hmm. First of all, it separates the place from where you work from where you sleep and live. That's a radically new thing in human life. There always were a few people that did that, but for the great majority to live and work in separate places, that's something radically new. The labor market in an industrial society doesn't care about paternal roles. It doesn't really care about children. Right. Children are an encumbrance. Marriage is an encumbrance because the wife maybe the market says she should be working in this city, and her husband or potential husband should be working in that city, and so marriage gets in the way of rational allocation of labor. Moreover, industrial society destroys, in fact, aims at completely eliminating the home economy, where people do take care of themselves. What do I mean by that? Well, it used to be that everybody made their own cloth and sewed their own clothing, made their own candles. Okay, all that's been industrialized. But even today, we're industrializing what was still left the home, which was childcare, early childcare, the care of the elderly. All of these things are also being industrialized. That is, turned over to professionals. You pay money to have others do it for you. Yeah. Even infant feeding has been industrialized. It used to be infants breastfed. Now the marketplace pushes infant formula. All of these are ways in which industrial society, both capitalist and socialist, aims at eliminating the family and the family economy. So you have to find a way to counter that. Ideally, the benefits of a market society, and there are many, and they're huge and they're important, but you have to find a ways to blunt that anti-family bias within industrial society, within capitalism, if you'll have it. And it's defining a good balance, which protects marriage, protects the home economy, protects, and in fact still finds a way to encourage childbirth again, finds a way to encourage natural marriage again. That's the trick of family policy. So I think you have to do that. Otherwise, marriages will disappear. Children will disappear. And in fact, we're seeing that happen in our own society today.
Right. And in many Western societies.
In almost all of them, yeah.
Now, Hungary is working to try to accomplish some of the things that you're talking about.
Very much so.
And how has that worked out? And what specific policy measures have they taken that have been successful?
Well, they're doing a number of things. In fact, they're doing it on an unprecedented scale. Tax relief, massive tax relief for families raising children. Most recently, they just introduced a proposal, not a proposal, it's law. Any woman who bears 4 children will be exempted from income tax for life.
So the whole family will be, or just
the family? Yeah, the family will be exempted from income tax for life. They have massive subsidies for new homes. They have for family homes. They are providing, again, they provide very generous child care, but they also provide an allowance for a stay-at-home parent. Mm-hmm. They find a way to balance those two. They are have generous allowances paid at time of a birth, bearing a child. All the costs associated with that are now being supported by the government through allowances and so on. You add it all together, it's a massive program. They are investing 4% of their gross domestic product into support for marriage and support for having children and raising them. How much money is that? Well, in the U.S. terms, if we did the same thing here, it would be annually an expenditure of $800 billion in support of families and in support of marriage. So it's a massive, massive thing. Have they turned things around? They have. They had a very low birth rate. It's rising. It's going to take a while to see what the effect is on completed fertility, but it's going up. At least it's heading in the right direction. And marital fertility is up about 20 to 25% over the low point they reached before starting these policies. What they want to do is get back from about an average of 1.3 children born per woman, at least get it back up to 2.1, the replacement level. That's their clear goal. And they say that is our primary purpose of this government in Hungary, of the Fidesz government, it's the Fidesz party, is to restore the family and restore natural fertility.
Has this been around long enough to see if it's made any noticeable impact on like the divorce rate or the rate of abortion or such things within the country?
Well, the abortion rate is down. There may be other reasons for that as well. In terms of divorce, I haven't seen numbers on that yet. I just haven't seen numbers on that. Something similar is going on in Poland. The principal introduction they have there is called 500 plus. It's an allowance paid to all families with a second and subsequent children. Again, there's no income test. It's 500 zlotys, which is about $130 to $140 per month, which is it's paid out right direct. It's been extremely popular. Mm-hmm. It's only been in operation about 3 years now. 2016 is when it came into effect. And it's very popular, and it seems to be starting to work. The other thing they're doing in Poland, one of the problems Poland has had since entering the European Union, is their young people have been leaving. Mm-hmm. With the free labor market, they've been going to England and Germany to find jobs. To try to keep them there, to try to encourage them to create families. The new proposal there is a policy to will eliminate income taxes on anybody under the age of 26.
I like that.
I think it's a great plan. Another thing you've seen in Hungary has been a plan to deal with student loan debt, which their problem is not as big as ours, but here's a model for us. Student loans will be forgiven as you give birth to children. And if you have at least 3 children, your student loan debt will all be paid off. I think we should do this. I actually proposed this about 12, 13 years ago here in the United States, that we should do the same thing here. The government created a system that's anti-marriage and anti-baby. That's what we call student loans. That's one of its effects. The government should deal with it by forgiving the debt. If you have children, I would like to see it within responsible marriages, if that's at all possible legally.
Well, this is all really fascinating. Here's a question for you. And I don't know if it even has an answer, but I'd love to hear from you. Tell us about a policy that has a negative impact on families that people might not expect in the American system.
Well, student loans, I just went through that. It was supposed to be a help, but it's proven to be quite awful. Well, I'll give you another example. We had a very successful policy in the United States starting, actually in the 1930s. I, for one, have argued, much to the consternation of many conservative friends, that the New Deal, its domestic policy platform, was very pro-family.
You're talking about the Roosevelt New Deal, not the Green New Deal?
No, talking about the Roosevelt New Deal of the 1930s and early 40s. And again, this is when the Democratic Party was a pro-family party. And everything they did in terms of social policy and even of economic policy was designed around a model of a breadwinning father, a mother at home, and at least 3 children. That was their assumption of what a normal American family was. That's what they thought they were protecting and encouraging and defending. And in many ways they did. One of the policies they introduced through the Housing Act of 1934 was a policy to provide subsidized loans for couples buying a first home. It was expanded greatly during World War II and after with the Veterans Administration Program, which gave interest-free loans to veterans and their wives. It was a huge explosion in housing, but it put families in housing. I mean, we had between 1945 and 1960, the number of home-owning Americans almost doubled. Mm-hmm. Number of people who owned their homes or had equity in homes, probably is a better way to put it. Sometimes the mortgages weren't paid off yet. It was a huge change, and almost all of that subsidy went to pay for support new young families just starting out, buying their first home. Well, in the late 60s, early 70s, there were complaints from others. This is sort of when the assumption that the family should be supported and encouraged was breaking down. Mm-hmm. Feminists were attacking that idea. Population control people said we don't want to encourage the birth of children. Anyway, housing policy shifted. And they ended the practice of limiting subsidy, so to speak, through the housing programs of the federal government, just to young couples buying a first home. They extended it far more broadly. In fact, to the point where actually there were some studies done by the 1980s. Federal policy was starting to encourage divorce. How was that? Because they were subsidizing mortgages for single people coming out of broken marriages. Mm-hmm. Why? Well, because they had to be fair, right? Okay, well, that was the argument. It had to be equal. But you had to support, you were supporting, in a way, the breakup of homes by providing a subsidy to create the second home. And in fact, the economic system benefited from that too. This is where I talk part of the cultural contradiction of capitalism. A divorce in the short run is a great thing for the economy. It creates two homes where one home had been sufficient. You're going to have 2 refrigerators now rather than 1, 2 stoves. Everything has to double. The family that the strong family that still has a garden, there's a lot of home cooked meals and things like that, is not doing much to support the economy. But the divorced family, which suddenly is eating out all the time, which is buying childcare, all these things are suddenly now monetized, and looks like the economy is going up, but in fact, it's not. So what we see is that housing policy shifted from supporting and encouraging the formation of families to actually subsidizing their breakup.
That's really interesting. I think I only have time for one more question, so let me ask you a final question.
Sure.
What do you think are the most important things for American Christians to advocate for politically, presently?
Well, if I was asked to write a platform for a presidential candidate, I think at least 2 things I would do. One is expand the tax relief attached to children. One of the good things that came out of the Trump tax reform a couple of years ago was an increase of the child tax credit from $1,000 up to $2,000. It should go still higher. It should be without income test. There's still phases out at the highest income level. I would increase it. If it means raising the top tax rate a little bit, we should do that. So a tax reform that would double the child tax credit again. A second reform that would take the subsidy that the federal government provides for preschool, both through taxation, through tax policy, and through a direct subsidy. Make an equivalent available to full-time parent staying home with a preschool child. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would do is what I already mentioned, student loan relief. Right now, Elizabeth Warren's running with that, and God bless her. I'm glad she is. She's raised a lot of important questions. But there should be a conservative alternative to what she's proposing. And my alternative is let the father and the mother of a child write off a quarter of their principal on their student loan debt with each child that's born. And if they have 4 children, the debt goes away. And again, I think it's a way to deal with the negative aspects of a system that is out of control, that has done more damage than good, and has done more damage than good. Yeah.
Actually, let me ask another truly final question. Perhaps maybe there might be another one after this. I'm realizing some people say that Christians shouldn't be political, that Christians are not supposed to be political. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think, as I just explained, if we're going to live in an urban society with a market-driven economy, it's irresponsible to not be political. That system has to be tweaked. It has to be controlled. It has to be directed. And it has to be done in the right way. And it can be done in the right way. It can also be done in the wrong way. And the wrong way will be done if Christians are not involved. My criticism of what we'll call the Christian right over the last 20 years has been, I don't think they've had their priorities very good. I think have dealt too much on what I would say are minor problems and which they cannot get a resolution to. But have avoided things that could win, like increasing the child tax credit. It's a way in which to embarrass the Democrats to vote the right way again. And I think it can be done. And again, dealing with the student loan debt. Again, they've not had creative policies in this area, but Christians have to get involved. We live in a democracy, and it's possible to do the right thing, and it's possible to get policy right, and we should do it. We should try to do it at least. And again, the alternative is going to be leaving it to the bad guys who are going to do it all the wrong way. And the children ultimately are going to be the ones that suffer the serious consequences from failure to get it right.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, Dr. Carlson.
Happy to be with you.